We're in the season where things are a little bit quieter around eastern Iowa. Severe weather is not uncommon or not very common in this portion of the calendar, and we're obviously a little too early for winter storms. But we are also at peak hurricane season, and sometimes that does come into play around the state of Iowa. This date in, well, it was 1961, was from Hurricane Carla's remnants. The effects of it were felt in parts of the state. In fact, several inches of rain occurred, and some areas finished with their wettest September ever as a result. Now here's the headline from the Cedar Rapids Gazette. This is from September 12th. The storm made landfall a couple days before that and still feeling the effects. Galveston in particular was particularly hard hit. It was southeast Texas that felt the impact of what was a Category 4 storm. But notice on the little subheadline here: heavy rain from Carla soaks Iowa. And that was the story with the storm here around these parts. In fact, the track of the heaviest rain took it from southeastern Texas, where some areas saw 10, 15 inches or more as it moved to the northeast. In fact, the most was Bay City, Texas, which saw over or just about 17.5 inches. But along its path, these areas here outlined in this brighter red and darker red saw 5, 7 inches or, again, more in some isolated cases. In fact, the unofficial totals around eastern Iowa had just over 6 inches in Marion, Montezuma close to 6 inches too, Dubuque and Cedar Rapids right around that 5.5 inch range, and then Oskaloosa, Tipton, and Iowa City getting less, but still more than 4 or 5 inches, and generally in a fairly short amount of time. Of course, that can cause a little bit of a headache. Carla still stands as the wettest tropical system to affect Iowa and south central Iowa. They got over 9 inches of rain from this, and still is for Wisconsin and Michigan too. And that was, of course, more than 60 years ago at this point. Now, the most recent tropical system to affect Iowa was Tropical Storm Cristobal. That was in June of 2020. Scenes around eastern Iowa looked a little bit like this. Rainfall was heavy, and it produced quite a bit of rain in many parts east of Interstate 35. Now, of course, this maybe looks like a normal rainy day, but totals added up quickly, and it did result in flash flooding in some cases. See this field still draining the water the next day based on the rain that fell. Now, Cristobal had the very uncommon track here that took it right across eastern portions of Iowa. In fact, that's not very typical. Usually the track stays outside of the state. In fact, we only found about 7 storms in history that came within 50 miles of the state, 2 that crossed it. This other one that came across southwest Iowa and east central Iowa, that's the famous storm from Galveston, Texas in 1900, which also occurred this week in history. So certainly a busy tropical history for eastern Iowa, although it is fairly limited in general.